Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome to another episode of Undercurrents. Hey, we got a great one for you tonight. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. And tonight is one of those special and rare nights that, well, comes along once every blue moon. And of course, we're talking about Valentina Suriani and remembrances of her. So, of course, on April 17th, 1977, David Berkowitz shot Alexander Esau and Valentina Suriani along the Hutchinson River Parkway service road here in the Bronx, and he did it a stone's throw from Valentina's apartment building. And it's interesting because April 1977 was a month of particular madness for Berkowitz, as you guys out there in the audience knows. He was in the midst of his rapidly escalating campaign of terror against the Carr family. And in the midst of all this, he shot Val and Alex. He left the Borelli letter and thereby drew them, their families and friends, and really the rest of the world into his widening web of madness. I first became aware of Val's circle of friends when Gary McNerney contacted me in 2021. He got in touch with me. He was a fan of the show, and he said that he had been a childhood friend of Valentina Suriani, and he wanted to see if I was interested in doing a show, and would I be? I said, of course, because that's really was one of the things that I wanted to do with this video series, which was to really humanize the victims. I felt like this was not something that was being done out there. So Gary came on board. He became a stalwart member of the team. We did several videos together. And through Gary, of course, I became aware of Valentina Suriani's wider circle of friends, which then included Mike Zicola into our video series. Today, we bring along on another very important member of that circle. Gloria Calilli-Zonghetti was another close childhood friend of Valentina, and she's graciously agreed to come on today to talk about their life together and their times together. And so basically, without further ado, may I present to you the one, the only, Gloria Calilli-Zonghetti. How are you, Gloria? Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Manny. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's this was a long time coming. I first heard of you several months ago from Gary, and took me a while to reach out, but I'm super glad I did it. And it seemed like the timing kind of all worked out for you as well. So welcome to our airwaves, and I'm sure our audience is very, very, very excited to hear from you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Gloria, I want to take it back to the beginning. You actually have come from a very interesting time period to me personally as a fellow Bronxite. We're not going to say exactly what date you were born. I know that that's always very, unless you have a problem, unless you don't have a problem with that.
Fabulous for my age.
You do. I have to say, you really do. But late 50s. So you're, of course, the late, just I'm speaking as a sociologist here. I guess we would call that late stage baby boomer, maybe the earliest of earliest Gen X cohort, sort of stuck in the middle, this weird sort of time period where I guess you guys were too young to be hippies and too old to I don't know, I guess just too young to be hippies. But why don't you give us an idea? I wanted to, before we got into sort of the heavier topics, I kind of really wanted to give the audience an idea as to your neighborhood growing up and the Bronx and those years, the late 50s, the 1960s, growing up as a child in the Bronx. And of course, here we have New York City. And just so everybody will get to, just so everyone knows, of course, there's Manhattan and here's the Bronx up here. It's the only borough of the city of New York attached to the mainland. And our story, Gloria, takes place in, I guess, what do you call this area that we're pointing to? Does it have a name?
They called it the Northeast Bronx. But
Just
for us, that was the Allerton Avenue section of the Bronx.
The Allerton Avenue section. Now, of course, so named.
My family originally came from the Fordham section of the Bronx, Arthur Avenue.
Oh, really?
And we moved there when I was 2.
Okay.
Onto Barnes Avenue when I was 2 years old. But most of my family was still on Arthur Avenue.
Now, so So now Arthur Avenue is an interesting subject in and of itself. I mean, that's and so these, of course, everyone should remember Arthur Avenue from the movie The Bronx Tale by what was Chaz Palminteri, starring Robert De Niro and all that. But that's a little bit more south of here. That's in this area down here, down in this area here. Well, I'm not quite sure. Sort of in this area over here by the New York Botanical Gardens.
Right.
So this area up here, why don't you describe for our audience, like, where, let's just take it down to your apartment. You grew up here at 2521 Barnes Avenue here in the Bronx.
It wasn't an apartment, it was a house.
It was a house. So we're looking at it right here, right?
Yeah, that's the house. And like I said before, that white building next to it was not there. None of those buildings were there. There was a gas station on the corner of Boston Road, and that was a giant lot. And where those trees are, there were weeds and grass that would, in the springtime, just grow as tall as you. You couldn't walk there. You'd have to, if you crossed Boston Road to come to my house, you'd have to walk in the street until you hit my driveway.
Really? Wait, I want to show the audience that. That's interesting. So Boston Road is now this main thoroughfare here, correct? And so Barnes Avenue down this way. Hold on, where did we miss your? Oh no, right here, 2521 Barnes. So this was all a weeded lot, and there was no sidewalk into your building. That's interesting.
There was a sidewalk, but the weeds would grow so tall over there that you couldn't walk through them.
And so what kind of area was it?
It was mostly an Italian Jewish neighborhood. And I always say this, I would wish my childhood on everybody. We, as far as I'm concerned, had the best childhood, the best neighborhood to grow up in. We were safe. Everybody looked out for everybody else. We were truly a community.
Yeah, it seems that way, that whole way of life in New York City, well, kind of lasted until I'm 15 years younger than you. And I kind of remember Riverdale being sort of the same, not quite that idyllic in a sense. And obviously now it's just ridiculous what's going on in New York City. But yeah, but
here we were all tight with all the neighbors. Everybody cared about everybody. Sometimes when we needed something, we'd just knock on the wall next door, and somebody would come out, and we'd yell across the porches.
And so
I always remember when my sister was getting married, we teased her for months. Every time she walked out of the house, one of the neighbors said, "Is that what you're wearing today? Today's your shower." That she just didn't even know the day of her shower. We told her it was her shower. She didn't believe us.
And so all these other houses were there when you were
across the street, everybody, and there was a building there. I don't know if it's still there. Yeah, it is still there. That's building. Still there. Those two buildings were there, and we were friends with everybody. And like I said, everybody looked out for everybody. We used to call the women who hung out their windows the flower pot ladies.
Really?
And they knew all the gossip of the neighborhood because they would hear everything. You know, they were always out there watering their plants when somebody was talking under the window. So
now Italian and Jewish, talk about that mixture. How did that?
It was great. We had the best delis and the best bakeries.
I can imagine. That's
bagels in my neighborhood.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm going to say Riverdale still has some of the best bagels in New York City, and so I challenge anyone. So 2521 Barnes Avenue. Now, so that's where you spent your childhood, and of course you went to school here at St. Lucy's, correct?
Yes, that's where I met Val.
Right. Now, St. Lucy's was a school that my audience is familiar with, because I did a walk and talk here with Gary McNerney, and we showed there's like a grotto around here.
Yeah, it's on Bronxwood Avenue. It's behind the church.
I think it's right here. A very interesting kind of like old school grotto. Yeah, right here. This grotto. Right.
And so down Bronxwood Avenue. And at the end of Bronxwood Avenue is the funeral parlor.
Is Ferenga Brothers, right?
It's at the end.
Right. And that's where we ended one of our videos, because that's, of course, where Val's funeral was. So, yeah. So tight-knit community, Italian and Jewish. Everyone seemed to get along. Was there any crime to speak of in these days?
I mean, I'm sure there was some crime, but nothing of any great shakes.
Who's this John Cificciello? Do you know who that is?
Is that who it says that? No.
John Cificciello.
No, I don't know him.
Don't know him. So then tell us then how many, so there must have been a lot of kids around the neighborhood.
There were our class, our first grade class. I did not go to pre-K or kindergarten. I started school in first grade. And I'm an identical twin. I know you've met my brother Robert. He's only 13 months younger.
Right.
So going to school when Robert got to stay home didn't make sense. That Teresa and I were going and Robert still got to stay home. You know, one of those moments. And then when you get to school, they separated me and Teresa.
Really?
So it was, and there were big classes. I think there were 44 kids in each first grade class. There were 2 first grade classes.
That's incredibly large.
It dwindled a little when we got older, but we were still a very big class. I mean, you're talking about 80 some odd kids between, the 2 first grades and 1 teacher, and we were all very well behaved.
Right, I can imagine Catholic school in the 1960s. I wouldn't mess around in those years.
We didn't.
So, and there was also a public school though near you guys too. I think it was PS 89.
PS 89 and PS 135 was there too. And Columbus High School. We're all in the same vicinity.
Where's Columbus now?
It would be down Bronxwood Avenue, the other way from Ferenga.
Let me see if I can find it. Columbus, because I think that's where Berkowitz went to high school. Columbus, Christopher Columbus, Astor Avenue, the Bronx. Here, hold on. So it's right in that area.
Right. It's right. They're all right there. They were all just a couple of blocks from each other. We played. We had our sports practices at PS 89. We had our softball practices at Columbus.
Now, actually, I don't want to not to skip ahead too much, but this is actually quite interesting to me because Berkowitz, just to bring him up now, of course, he'll come up in our discussion a little later, but he went to Columbus High School, which is like, I guess, right here.
Yeah. It was a big high school.
Right. And not only that, but what I found quite eerie and coincidental, and of course it doesn't mean anything, but Berkowitz actually lived on Barnes Avenue. He lived here.
I did know that.
On 2151 Barnes Avenue. He actually shot a bunch of dogs here. Hold on one second. Right here. So this guy, he was like, it's almost like the lives were tracking one another in a sense. I mean, I know it sounds a little dramatic, but
we don't think so because, like I said to you a while back, between Donna Loria and Val and Judy Placido, we're all about a mile from each other.
Right, exactly. I mean, we
felt our neighborhood was being targeted.
Right, but what I meant by that was I didn't mean that he was actually literally stalking you guys. What I meant by that was it's just this odd coincidence that he was so close to your neighborhood. High school, he had an apartment there, right within a few blocks of where all of you guys were living your life, and it was in different.
Carefree.
Yeah. Now, exactly, carefree. So now I want to let's sort of talk about how'd you meet Val and all of that, your impressions of her, your childhood with her, your friendship with her. I kind of want to get deep with this, if as deep as you're comfortable getting.
Like I said, I'm an identical twin, and my sister was in the other class, and I was very nervous. I didn't really know anybody in my class at the time, and Val was in the first row with her back against the blackboard, and I was in the second row directly opposite her, and she actually saw that I was nervous and introduced herself to me.
Really? So she
about 3 or 4 days into, somewhere in the first week of school.
So she actually was empathetic and saw that you were, so what'd you say, shy?
I'm not shy, I guess nervous. I don't know if I was chewing on my nails or a pencil or something. And
And so instead of like, so her nature wasn't as a bully or as someone who would take advantage of that. It was actually the complete opposite. It was empathy. And so talk more
Val
about that. Val
was one of the sweetest kids. Like I told you, she had a lot of friends. She was very well liked. There was nothing not to like about Val.
I have this picture that Gary sent me of, I believe this is probably later in your guys' lives. But this is because you guys,
that's 8th grade graduation,
right? So you guys met in the you said kindergarten,
First grade.
First grade. So here you are several years later, and there's Gary, of course, who the audience knows.
Actually, the girl right next to me is also an identical twin. We had two sets of identical twins in our class.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's probably smart that they separated you guys. I mean, because if you're together all the time, that would be.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work
but,
out.
That girl and Gary came to school later.
Uh-huh.
They weren't in our first grade class.
So you and of course here's Val here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you guys were then, so once she comes up to you and says, what did she say? Do you want to be friends? I'll be your friend.
Yeah. And then we exchanged phone numbers that day.
Really?
Somewhere in the first week of school.
Interesting. And then of course you only lived a few blocks away from one another.
That was it.
So then how did the friendship develop?
We had similar interests. We hung out when we could. We were still very young, so we weren't really going to each other's houses then. And later on in school, I mean, we did our school plays and other such things, the normal things that you would do in school. And you'd hang out in the cafeteria at lunch. And sometimes the teachers gave us a break in the classroom and we'd hang with each other and just chit chat. Our main interest was sports. We were both big Pete Maravich fans.
Now, it's to someone totally ignorant, who's Pete Maravich?
I cannot believe you just said that.
You believe it?
Watching this show right now going.
Hey, I'm sorry, guys.
Pistol Pete Maravich was the greatest basketball player to ever live.
And so, all right. So now,
we fell in love with him in college. He went to LSU.
Really? So were you guys like tomboys? Was what was going on here?
I would say we had our tomboy and our little feminine sides.
Now, here's something that Gary sent me back in the old days. To Gary, best of luck, high school, and all that follows. Love, Val. And so this was Tim Foley from the Mets.
Oh, she adored Tim Foley. She used to carry around his baseball card in her wallet.
Really? So yeah. So it sounds like she
was
was
big Tim Foley fan.
Heavily.
I mean, I'm glad her father never realized she was a Met fan.
That's funny. I love the Mets personally. I mean, I just love baseball in general. So, that.
Yeah, but you're talking to Yankee fans here.
I love the Yankees, guys. I know that one of your friends growing up works for the Yankees.
He's worked for the Yankees for many, many years. He's my brother's closest friend.
Yeah, he told me.
He's good friends with my husband also, but
yeah, we won't identify.
Like brothers. They're very, very thick.
I think your brother told me that this guy actually, now of course I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he got brought in as a Son of Sam suspect because he was driving around one of the clubs. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Robert will have to tell us that story if he's watching. Oh wait, Robert's in the audience.
Is he?
Robert, yeah, here he goes. So
I don't know that story.
So there was something with that guy who works for the Yankees. Robert was gonna hook me up with him because he had some sort of and I think the guy became a cop.
This is not a story I'm familiar with, so
yeah.
Have to do it.
So Rob, if you tell the story in the chat, that'd be kind of cool. So would you consider that you guys like on the scale of friendship that what was would you consider that you guys were the closest of friends? Well, I mean, and that kind of stuff.
No, Val had a lot of friends.
Really?
I mean, we were as close as two kids. I think in grammar school, it's very different if you're not like going to attach yourself to a best friend. And I think that because I was a twin, that it was more important for me to be friends with a lot of people. But yeah, Val and I spent time up at her apartment and she spent time at my house. We played on sports teams together. I mean, we hung out in big groups more so than one-on-one.
Right. Okay.
So most of the time, Val and I were in the schoolyard, the gym, or at the field.
So I want to actually show something related to that. So Robert said driving around Eliphas nightclub and brought in for questioning. Yeah, that was the story. I still want to hear that one. You guys are like the gold mine of stories. I'm so glad
there's a lot of stories growing up.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys entered into my life here. So of course here is you and your sister, your twin sister, who I remarked how well you guys definitely are identical twins, but it's interesting how kind of different you look from one another.
Yeah, and there was a point in my life where I tried not to look like Teresa.
And so this is you here.
Yes.
And so, of course, this is Val here.
Yeah, that was the 8th grade dinner dance.
So that was the 8th grade dinner dance. And so
Look, we
what?
all wore corsages back then. They don't even do corsages anymore.
Yeah, look at that. Well, I didn't even notice. Yeah, your corsage is huge. What is she wearing? Like a tuxedo?
She's got a white pantsuit on.
So what was the deal with Val as she kind of grew up? Was she so you're saying she was she was outgoing and had a lot of friends?
She could be shy, but once you got in and Val let herself just be herself, she was great. She was a lot of fun. She was extremely funny.
What kind of humor did she have?
She had a little bit of a dry sense of humor. But but she was very quick-witted.
Well, I think that's probably because she was very creative, apparently. She wanted to become an actress. So it sounded like she had a real sharp mind. Now, this was getting back to the sports thing. So you guys were on a basketball team together, apparently. And this I found very poignant because, number one, people don't send Christmas cards to each other like this hardly anymore. It's all online.
Yeah.
But this is from your mother to Val, and I just wanted to read it to the audience because I just found this to be kind of actually quite beautiful.
Mom wrote a poem to every player on the team that year.
Now, I asked you this off the air. This is one of the very few questions that I asked you off the air because, as my audience likes to know, knows, I always like to let the magic happen live on the air. So we didn't do any extensive questions. But I asked if your mom if this was like a standard poem that she wrote to everybody, not just Val. Was it the same words to everybody, or everybody on the team got their own?
It was individualized to every member of the team.
All right, so let's read your mom's.
My mom was also very creative.
Yeah, it seems like it, and she and in fact she's one of my subscribers now. I was very shocked to see that.
Mom.
Yeah, I mean she's seems like a very lovely woman. So this was and your mom's got a great sense of rhythm, by the way. So to the girl of our backcourt who sleeps through the game, I'd like to remind you that winning brings fame. Our man-to-man defense has been tried and fell through. And so I developed the zone, especially for you. So stay awake, keep your eye on the ball, and you'll see that the zone is a defensive wall. Defense is great, but the score will endure. So score 3 for me, or I'll bop you for sure. That's great. Now, I want to go through.
Like I said, I was surprised that she had saved it all those years.
Now, who saved this?
I don't really know, but her sister had given it to me.
Val's sister
had given it to me years after. I'm not that long ago, just a couple of years ago. So when they were moving her parents again, she found it in the house.
Wow. Did she send you the original, or did she just send you a copy of it?
I think I let her keep it, and I just took a picture of it.
This is amazing. Now I have some questions about this. So what's the deal with Val sleeping through the game?
Val had her moments of boredom. What can I tell you?
So of course, winning
brings through the game, but you know what? The man-to-man defense was a lot for her.
So this is great. Your mom was able to rib her a little bit.
Just a little bit. Mom ribbed everybody. When we started on the team, there was a woman named Pat Aarons was the coach, and she was like a legendary coach for our parish. And when she retired, they were scrambling. Who were they going to get to replace her? And my mom stepped up and decided to coach the team, and found out that a lot of the other coaches for the girls' basketball teams were girls she went to school with.
Really?
Yes. And so they formed their own little coaches league. I don't know if you remember the STP oil.
Yeah.
Everybody had those stickers when we were kids. And so they put the stickers on their little butts and called themselves the Sturdy 30 Pros. And they played games for charity and other such things.
So Val was into sports, and so all right. So how did your lives kind of progress as you went along in childhood? First grade turns to second, to third. Pretty soon you're in eighth, and then.
And there were years when she was not in my class because our classes got divided every year. The only thing constant for me was that Teresa would never be in my class.
Right. Right.
And I would only have one of the other twins.
The Phyla twins.
Their names were Judy and Francis. So, maybe one year Judy was in my class, maybe one year Francis was in my class. And when we got to 6th grade, we actually would switch classes and go into the other class for history and math.
Oh, you would start to do that whole thing where you would move around. Yeah, we did that in 6th grade too. I remember, to prepare us for junior high school. Such a nervous.
Well, for you it's junior high school, but for us, we stay there till the 8th grade, and then we go off to high school. That's how schools work.
So then what happens after this 8th grade graduation with you and Val? Like, do you guys remain friends?
This was interesting because I did want to go to St. Catherine's, but St. Catherine's was actually one of the more expensive high schools.
Now, St. Catherine's Academy, just so everyone knows,
was within walking distance.
Right. So everyone, so real quick, let me get right. So St. Lucy's, everything is up here, Barnes Avenue, and then St. Catherine's is down. Oh, wait, I missed it. Oh, right here. Yeah.
Right there. It wasn't that far.
And me and Gary, we did a video. We did one of our videos there. So now this is where Val went to high school, and you did not go to high school.
No, because I always tell this story. Teresa did not want to go to St. Catherine's. She wanted to go to St. Barnabas, and I still wanted to go to St. Catherine's, and I was not in the I have to do everything my twin sister does mode. But one night I overheard my father and my mother talking, and Daddy said, I could send 2 of them to St. Barnabas for less than it would cost me to send one of them to St. Catherine's. And Robert will be going off to the Mount the next year.
Right.
And we were all very conscious of, we were not rich people.
Right.
Everybody worked. I got my working papers at 14 years old.
Yeah, I have to say, I was actually surprised when I first met Gary, because he said, "Oh, Val lived in the projects," and I was like, "Projects? I mean, we normally associate projects with low income, but what was that? What was it? Was it? Did it have the same kind of
like that?
Yeah,
it was not really like that back then.
It didn't have the same connotation as today.
No, because everybody who was even in the projects was in the same boat as everybody else.
Right. So working class, sort of striving towards middle class, and some people got there.
I remember coming home from work one day, and some of the guys were walking Teresa and I home, and when of course, the weeds were all overgrown, so we were walking in the street, and we cut into the curb cut of our driveway there, and Teresa said, "This is my house," and one of the guys said, "You must be rich. You live in a house." No, we're not rich. It's a 2-family house, and the tenant pays the rent.
Right, and attached no less. But I actually had a bunch of friends who lived in those exact type of houses growing up, and I was always jealous because I was like, "You have a staircase, at least. You have a second floor." That's so amazing to me.
I don't think any of that ever fazed us.
Yeah.
I still don't. I never go into somebody's house and look at their house. I'm going in there to visit them, and I don't really care.
Right. So Val ends up at St. Catherine's, and you and Teresa end up at Barnabas. And so, did you guys stay in touch? How did friendship sort of?
Things evolved because St. Barnabas is in the Woodlawn section of the Bronx, and so a lot of our friends were on that end now. Right. So now we're hanging out in Yonkers and stuff like that. And I would still see Val in the neighborhood. And I know all the other friends I went to grammar school with, still see them in the neighborhood. And I was working in the neighborhood to pay for high school and college. But the friendship definitely waned.
Right. So I mean, I see how that happens. I mean, you didn't know that Val was going to be a future victim of David Berkowitz, and that's just normal stuff. I mean, people.
But I mean, like I say, I would still see her in the neighborhood, ask her what's going on. We were still members of the CYO, Catholic Youth Organization. So I would see her at local dances. I did play for our high school CYO for my freshman year of high school.
So, now the Catholic Youth Organization is important to this story, because this is actually how Valentina met Alexander Esau. Do you have any? We've got that story from Mike Zicola, and it's in one of our things.
I was not into camp.
Right.
So I did not work as a camp counselor there. I know my brother did. And like I said, but for me, as part of the CYO, I mostly did the dances and the other events.
Right. But did you know the story of Valentina meeting Alexander, and
Oh yeah, I heard the story when they all came back, saying that you tell it, because it was a crazy story. They were in a U-Haul.
Well, why don't you tell the story for people who didn't get Mike?
I would rather not, because I was not there.
All right,
So I would not do the story justice.
All right, so it's the story in a nutshell is that the priest,
Father Oliverio.
Father Oliverio, right, who was apparently a very beloved, adored and beloved person up there. He took the kids down somewhere in Manhattan. I'm not quite sure where.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
And he threw them all in a U-Haul truck, I believe, with the back open. In the heat. Maybe the back was either open or closed. I'm not quite sure. And they're in Hell's Kitchen around the 40th and 10th Avenue in Manhattan. And they're stuck at a red light. And all of a sudden, Alexander Esau walks by, sees Val in the back of the truck, and somehow or other, the two connect. And that's the rest. That was that. And I mentioned to Mike about how freaking random that is, and how if one thing had changed, everything would be different today.
I believe in fate, so.
You do? So you believe this was fated?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think they were always meant to meet, and that it was if it didn't happen that night, it would have happened another night.
Now, were you privy to their relationship at all? Did you see them together?
On occasion, you know, at some of the functions, but like I said, mostly no. Okay, occasionally you see them at Gino's,
now
the neighborhood and stuff like that. But I really never. I always felt if she was out on a date, I didn't want to get involved. You know, she's busy with somebody else.
Right. So this actually brings me to the question about how serious they were, because that's one thing that we never really get. Was we're told in Son of Sam that they're in lovers' lanes, and that kind of implies like one night stands and hookups and pickups maybe. And because
Val was not like that.
No, but what I'm saying is like we get that impression from just the lack of general information about the people, the victims. So I'm curious about
that was Val not usual, making out in the car.
No, but were Val and Alex, they were closer though, right? It wasn't just a casual thing.
No, they had been going out a couple of years at that point.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, at a minimum, I'd say at least 2.
Which is
point. I don't know how long they were serious, how long the relationship was casual and before
right.
it got serious. But when I ran into Val, like I said to you, I ran into her about a little more than 2 weeks before her murder on Williamsbridge Road. I was coming out of the dentist office and she was there. And the two of us were so happy to see each other. We gave each other a big hug. And I asked her, we do just general catch up. What's going on? What's new? I got to do my freshman year of college while I was still a senior in high school. So at that point, I was finishing up my second year of college and, being forced to declare a major. And that was going into finals week at that point. And I said to her, well, what are you doing? And she said, I don't know. I think I have a connection out in California, and I'm thinking of going to California to maybe look into modeling and acting. And I asked her how her parents felt about that. And she kind of shrugged it off. And I asked her how Alex felt about that. And she said, you and I should really talk. And I said, well, I'm working for D'Alessio's. They close at 6:00 on Saturday night. Why don't you just come by and we'll go over to Gino's and have a slice of pizza. We could catch up and you could still go out with Alex that night. And she said, that's a great idea. And then she said, and I always find this so interesting. She said, let me give you my new phone number. I said, oh, yeah, right. I heard you moved to Hutchinson River Parkway. And I always find it interesting that our relationship began with her giving me a phone number and ended with her giving me a phone number.
Oh, my God.
And we never got together. And I didn't get to tell you the story of how I found out, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I'm just sort of reeling from that. It's powerful. Then this was 2 weeks before her murder?
It was a little more than 2 weeks because it was, I think, Wednesday or Thursday.
Do you know?
And she got killed that the following.
On April 17th, which I'm not I'm not sure if that was a Saturday night or weekend.
It was a Sunday morning.
Right, Saturday going into Sunday. Did she ever tell you who these people in California were that she had?
She had mentioned the name, but I don't recall it. She mentioned a name, but I really don't recall it.
Right, because I'm just curious. So, what do you think? Do you think that would have worked out for her?
I don't know. I never got to talk to her about it. I just remember saying to like being a little shocked and saying to her, "Oh my God, how do your parents feel about you moving all the way across the other side of the country?" I mean, because they were a very close family,
right? Right.
and then they were a very welcoming family. People were always welcomed into their apartment. I mean, every time I went in there, her mother wanted to feed me.
And so it was Val and her sister. Did she have any brothers?
No.
And her parents, what did her father do for a living?
I don't remember.
I've only seen.
I know, that was not something we really talked about.
Right. I've only
even
seen
my closest friends. I don't know what their parents.
I've seen
not
pictures.
Back then. I mean, in grammar school, you just don't care.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I've seen pictures of her father. Never picked any pictures of her mother, but there's a couple pictures floating around of her father. He was a very elegant looking man. He seemed like he was very tall.
Well, he was fairly tall. He wasn't nice. Val looked a lot like her father. And her and her sister looked very much alike.
So we have here so here is the Valentina's second apartment. This was the apartment that
I was never there.
Where that she was going to give you the number of, and
so she did give me the number.
Right, and it was 1950 Hutchinson River Parkway. I believe it said she lived on the 12th or 13th floor. I'm not quite sure. And Gary and I started a video out in front of here, and this was just, as I said in the intro, this was just a stone's throw away from the shooting site, which was 1878. So I kind of want to ease into the into the shooting, the aftermath, and all that kind of stuff, because it's obviously part of the story. And so why don't you tell us, so 2 weeks before her murder, she exchanges numbers, and you had this plan to meet. And now, what did you think she was going to talk about with you? It sounded kind of serious.
I think she was at that point, I think we were just going to keep things casual and talk about what our plans were, what we were thinking about doing. And
right. So it was just I was just like, oh, we got to talk. I want to update our life.
Right. I mean, we hadn't seen each other in a couple of weeks at that point. And the last time I saw her, it was a quick, hi, how you doing? What's new? I gotta go here. I gotta go there. I mean, our lives were very busy back then.
Mm-hmm.
We had to work, or we weren't going to pay for college.
That's interesting. Now, of course, college was a lot less money back then, but still, yes, people did work. I know that a lot of people of that generation definitely put themselves through college. It's always interesting when you hear stories like that, because it's so different nowadays. People just get loans and then end up in loans, paying back loans.
We were very fortunate. At St. Barnabas, they offered us a very special program. They called it the Access Program, Accelerated College Curriculum for Eligible High School Seniors. And we got to do our freshman year of college while we were still seniors in high school. We did it with the College of Mount St. Vincent. And they combined the tuitions for a very small amount. Mm-hmm. So I got my first year of college for a really small amount. And I wound up getting a $500 a year scholarship, which was a big enough number back then, and was able to stay on and finish college.
So Valentina, the 2 weeks before, and so your life is humming along, Valentina's life is humming along, and
well, it isn't, because you have to remember that the atmosphere was out there. Several murders and attacks had occurred.
So that's the question I had, because I always thought, I know that as a Son of Sam researcher, that the frenzy sort of started ramping up on the with the shooting before Valentina's, the one right before
the one in Queens,
in Forest Hills, Virginia Voskerichian, on March 8th.
I think she was a nursing student or something.
Correct. She was a student at Columbia University. I'm not quite sure what it was, but But that was the one where, yeah, all of a sudden the media and the police put all the shootings together. So yeah, you're definitely placing it into the right context. But the Valentina shooting was the one that really, really ramped up the craziness in the city because he
It
left a
was the
letter.
only double murder, and it was the one where he left the note.
Left the note.
Well,
So,
and
but
called himself the son of Sam.
now, let's right, exactly. But before we get to that, so did Valentina, was she aware of any of this stuff?
Everybody was aware. Everybody was aware.
Did you ever have any conversations with her about it?
No, not her. Because like I said, I only ran into her about 2.5 years
Right.
before. And, we were talking about going to Gino's at 6 o'clock at night.
Right.
So there wasn't any major concern.
Now, at this point, of course, the Jody Valenti shooting hadn't happened, but Donna Lauria and no, I'm sorry, Judy Placido.
Judy Placido, because Jody Valenti
was with Donna Lauria, correct?
Right.
Now, those two were basically around the corner from where Val was shot. So tell us, like, now, but of course, that shooting happened before there was a Son of Sam.
Right.
Right. So was there any?
It was devastating just to even have something like that happen in our neighborhood.
Did you
even to assume it was a drive-by, a mistake, whatever it was still tragic.
Did you know Donna Lauria or Jody?
I met Donna Lauria once quick because my brother knew her brother, her older
Really?
brother. And he worked in Baskin Robbins, and it was like,
that's crazy.
This is Donna, but I did not know. I'd see her in the neighborhood after that because I knew who she was.
Right.
And her and Jody Valenti were like a pair. They obviously were best friends.
Now, what's the deal with Peachtree Discos? Was that a hot spot?
I did not go there, so I do not. I mean, I assume.
Because that's where
you're talking about Peachtree.
Peachtree's in New Rochelle, because that's where.
Yeah, that was very big. I think I may have gone a couple of times, but I was not a big
clubber.
No,
because that's where Donna and Jody were the night that they were shot, and I had on Tony Amato, the DJ from there, who said that Berkowitz actually frequented that place and introduced himself to him. Yeah, introduced himself to him several times.
I mean, I could probably count on two hands the number of times I was at Peachtree's.
Right. So you met Donna Lauria just casually one time, and how about Jody?
I think they were together. I don't really recall because it's not a memorable moment.
But then when they were shot, did you immediately know who that was?
I just went into Baskin Robbins to get some ice cream.
Right.
That was my goal.
But when the shooting happened, when they were shot, did you know by name who they were, or?
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that, actually.
When we went to Catholic school, I went to an all-girl Catholic school. St. Catherine's was also an all-girl Catholic school, and I assume a lot of them worked that way. The freshmen came in and they were assigned senior sisters. Robert went to an all-boys Catholic school, and his freshman year was assigned a senior brother, who was Donna Lauria's brother.
Wow.
That was his senior brother that year. So it wasn't anything, like I say, meeting somebody in the neighborhood quick that's not really one of your friends.
Right. And there was right, and there was no reason to think it was significant.
I gotta go.
Right, because you didn't know what was going to happen. But this is quite interesting, this circle of friends, how like there's these webs between you, Val, Donna, and what about Judy Placido? Was she known by you guys?
My grandparents, my mother's parents lived on Westervelt Avenue. And yeah, we had a lot of friends over there. I was there very often, and Judy was part of that group.
Interesting. Now, I know Judy is very, very private, does not like to be talked about. And
I don't blame her.
Yeah.
One bit.
Yeah, we've tried to get her on. She won't even respond.
And like, I've said to you, there's so many of us who bear the scars and pain from that whole summer. It'll never go away.
So this is
Judy doesn't want to talk about it. I totally respect that.
So
I can't blame her. She survived it. God love her.
I mean, it's unbelievable that she survived. Exactly. I mean, it's
and she still bears the scar.
Yeah, I can imagine. And But it's just crazy how so many threads from this one neighborhood in the Bronx. And then you have Berkowitz going to high school in the same neighborhood and then living in the same neighborhood a few years prior, which
But
is
it's like I said to you, Manny, that the neighborhood was thick.
right.
We all cared about it. Even people we didn't know we cared about. You said hello to people on the street so casually
So,
because everybody was just, it was a tight-knit neighborhood.
so Donna gets shot, and then what's the reaction in the neighborhood before we get to Val?
Well, nobody, confusion.
Uh-huh.
Why? Who would just shoot this beautiful, 18-year-old girl, 17-year-old girl? Didn't make any sense.
Were there any rumors going around?
Yeah, if there were, I kind of stayed out of it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, as far as we were concerned, it wasn't deliberate.
Right.
That it was some horrifying accident, and, glad that, Jody was okay.
And did you ever do you remember the point when you then connected Donna Lauria's shooting to this string of crimes that was happening? What ended up becoming the Son of Sam crimes? Like, when did you guys go
After Judy got hit?
after Judy got hit?
Well, that was most of the people in our neighborhood at that point, like I said, felt like our neighborhood was being targeted. It's starting with Donna, which was almost the year before. That was actually I think June or July of 76.
June, right. July 29th, 76.
76.
Yeah.
And so now you're coming almost a year later. I mean, Judy gets hit the end of June.
Right.
11 months later.
Right. And in the interim, you had Val and Alex.
Right. And they were all a mile from each other.
Right. Now, of course, you guys didn't know.
And now he's called himself the Son of Sam, and it was frightening.
And of course,
I remember I had tickets to go see Emerson, Lake and Palmer. That
I love
July
ELP.
9th, and Daddy didn't want us to go. My father did not want us to go.
Because of this whole thing.
I paid for the tickets.
I mean, you guys were probably safe going to a concert, I would imagine.
Well,
but
the deal was that we went to the concert, and then everybody came back to my house and slept over.
Now, ELP, I love ELP. So we could have a whole conversation about that. But
I saw them with a 98-piece orchestra, 2 cannons, and Keith Emerson's flying pianos.
I worked for the guy for many years. I worked for the guy who played percussion in that orchestra. A guy named Jonathan Haas. It's funny. So, all right, this is a question. So you're saying that you, in all likelihood, Valentina Suriani was aware of this shooting spree that was going on. It makes
everybody was. They were calling him the 44 caliber killer.
So why did she then feel so comfortable parking where she did, and being out in this lover's lane allegedly?
I don't want to.
You can't put words in her mouth.
But we all still felt very safe in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to assume that her parents did what my parents did. I want you to do this, and I want you to come straight home.
Right, and she probably
whatever happened that night happened, and I can't even begin to imagine.
So how did you find out? Did you find out through the papers, or did you get tell us that story?
I'm going to get a tissue. The blue laws had recently been repealed in New York State, and businesses that were not allowed to open, legally allowed to open on Sundays, were now opening on Sundays. And I worked for D'Alessio's on Allerton Avenue. It was a block and a half from my house. And the owners were conscious of what Sundays meant, especially to Italian families, because they were Italian. And we worked every third Sunday, 1 Sunday on, 2 Sundays off. Teresa and I worked that Sunday morning. The store opened from 8 o'clock to 2 p.m. The store manager on the day that we worked also understood the importance of family, and he would get there early, and he'd put up a big pot of coffee, and he'd go across the street to Lanzetta's and pick up some buns, and we would have a family breakfast before going to our respective posts. Teresa and I got up early that morning like we always did, like 2 little church mice, quiet, so no radio went on, no TV, no nothing. And we walked out the door and probably got to D'Alessio's around 7:15, 7:20 to have a nice little breakfast and a little chat before starting work. And everybody was just in the back room having their coffee and buns and talking about whatever they did Saturday night. And then we all went to our respective posts. My sister was working Register 8, which was the express line, and actually the first register you would encounter when you came into the store. And I was in the middle at Register 4, and I could see Allerton Avenue. It had to be close to, I don't know, about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I saw my father. And he was in what I would call military mode. He was marching, a man on a mission. And he didn't cross the street. Normally, he would cross the street, go pick up a newspaper at Abe's candy store, and then go into Lanzetta's to get buns, bread, and dessert for whatever family was coming over that day. But he didn't. He came straight down, picked up a newspaper, and marched into D'Alessio's and ignored Teresa and got on my line and started shooing people away. And I just remember looking over at Teresa, and she just kept shrugging her shoulders at me. And what did I do wrong? I didn't break curfew. I was home reasonable last night. I couldn't even imagine. My head was reeling until he finally stood in front of me. And I said to him, Dad, what's the matter? What did I do? My dad did not have a bedside manner at all. So when in doubt, blurted out. He just looked at me and said, Gloria, Val was killed last night.
Oh my God.
And wanting desperately, but he just said not to be true. And knowing the atmosphere, I said, Dad, that's not funny. And he just stared me down and said, you know when I'm kidding. And he dropped the newspaper on the register. And big picture of Val and Alex, 44 caliber killer. Scanning the article, and I could feel the coffee and buns making their way back up, and put my hand over my mouth, ran downstairs to the bathroom, and got sick and cried, I don't know, uncontrollably for however long I cried. I remembered splashing cold water on my face and sipping cold water from my cupped hand and grabbing a Tic Tac out of my smock pocket and composing myself and starting to climb the stairs. And when I got to the top of the stairs, the anger hit and my hands were in fists, and I punched the wall next to the time clock. And it was particle board, so it gave way but scraped my knuckles. And everybody was milling around my register at that point. Teresa gave me a big hug. Daddy hugged me, and he just, everybody in the store knew Val. It's not like she was some stranger. And Daddy said, I'm going to go down and tell your brother. I don't know if he's heard yet, because he was working at Baskin Robbins and they were getting ready to open.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I'll be back at 2:00 to get you and your sister. I said, okay, fine. The next 4 hours are going to be hell, but okay. At that point, it started spreading around the neighborhood, and I could see, because, a lot of people lived in apartments above the stores on Allerton Avenue.
Yeah.
So now the news was spreading, and you could just see people on the street, with their hands over their mouth and clutching their chests while they're talking to each other, and the women shouting from the windows. It was a tough couple of hours till my father came back to get us. This was when I was in I didn't want to look like Teresa mode.
Uh-huh.
And Teresa's hair was shoulder length and brown, which was kind of considered at that point that he was going after women with shoulder length brown hair. And I had a very short haircut back then. It was a female DA back
right
then. And so Daddy came back to get us, and he held our hands and we walked. And we had to go in the street because the weeds were all overgrown. And when we turned at the last parked car there into the curb cut of our driveway, my mother came out of the house in what I would call lunatic mode, screaming at my sister at the top of her lungs, you're cutting your hair, you're cutting your hair today.
Oh, my.
We're going to Luigi's and you're cutting your hair today. And the rest of the day was not pleasant.
I can only
Teresa
imagine.
Teresa did go and cut her hair.
Uh-huh. Wow. And so what were people like? People knew it was the 44 caliber killer,
but the note was in the article.
right? So all of a
It was
sudden
in the
now,
article.
right?
There was
All of a
a
sudden,
big picture. If you opened the paper, there was a big picture of the note in the article.
they printed the last page for sure. They actually didn't print the first couple pages because
Right, because it was too many, but they
well, they
did.
wanted to conceal it also for when they
Right,
arrested the guy to know, because they ended up asking Berkowitz when they arrested him
right.
about what was in that letter that hadn't been printed, and he knew exactly what was in it. That was one of their techniques to find out. So, wow. So then what happens? Like, do you speak to Val's parents? Like, what's
My mother was on the phone with everybody. I
uh-huh.
don't know that she talked to Val, but all the moms, all the everybody, it became a very supportive group to try to get
Right.
us through this particular tragedy.
It's unbelievable, like the
And
actions of
you
the
have to realize too, Alex was still alive at that point.
really.
Alex was still alive in the hospital. He was not pronounced dead until later that night.
Now, were you guys friends with Alex at
I,
all, or
I was
just
not. I only met him a few times.
right, right? What about people from the neighborhood? Was he
As far as I know, yeah, he was friendly with all of Val's friends.
uh-huh. Wow. So then what happens now? Like what are you guys all saying to each other? Like what's going on in the neighborhood now?
Nobody knew what to do. I mean, this one hit way too close to home.
Right. And of course this was on
And
the
then to have it connected at that point in time to Donna Lauria.
right, because then it connects
Right.
back to Donna
It connects
Lauria, of
back to
course.
Donna Lauria because it was the same 44 caliber gun.
Right. And of course Placido had not yet had been
No,
shot yet. That came about a month and a half later.
that just threw everybody into a major
I
frenzy.
can imagine. I mean, and that's a whole other show in and of itself, in a sense, because I can
Yeah.
only imagine what it was like. Did you ever see that movie Summer of Sam, the
Yes.
Spike Lee movie? Now I thought that movie was going to be more about Son of Sam than it was. It was really more kind of about neighborhoods like yours. These close knit neighborhoods where kind of everyone knew each other, and they do have a sense of the frenzy that took over
Yeah.
in the neighborhood. Did anybody have any suspicions that it was like a local guy? Because it actually ended up being a local guy,
It
but
ended up being, but nobody knew. Well, at that, after Judy got hit, it was presumed that it had to be somebody who knew everybody, even even if he didn't know everybody. That was the assumption.
right. And it's a good assumption if you think
Right,
about it.
because you're talking about, like I said, uh, four people, because that you have to include Jody.
Right.
Four people within a mile of each other.
Right. Now, of course, now we know that, Berkowitz was basically just going to the neighborhood. He started this whole thing in the
Yeah, it
neighborhood that
was
he was
random.
comfortable with.
Yeah, he was just looking for opportunity.
It was random, but he chose Burr Avenue there because he was
Mhm.
familiar with it so much because he grew up in Co-op
Yeah, and he would know
City.
how to escape from it.
Right, he knew all the
Yeah.
routes and all that kind of stuff. He ended up actually knowing all of New York City
Hmm.
because he was a cab driver, and basically all he would do was drive around New York City looking for victims. I wonder whether there's any more victims that we don't know about. And on the other corollary, how many possible victims are now alive today, but could have been his victim, which is a scary thought. But this is one of those things where it's like people never realized that when Berkowitz shot Val that night and Alex, he not only killed her, but he killed everything that could have come after her career, her potential family, her children, her grandchildren. In one act, he snuffed out an entire line of a human being's
Hmm.
genetics. And so one of my questions to you, and this might be a tough one to answer, is if you had the opportunity to sit down with Berkowitz, what would you say to him?
I don't think I could be in the room with him.
Hmm.
I really don't.
Have you been following his religious conversions? Do you have any
I
opinion of
don't
that?
buy any of it.
You don't buy any of it.
No, I don't. I think once you have evil in your heart, it's there.
Mhm.
If God wants to forgive him, he can. But there's a lot of us who won't. I mean, I could tell you there are a lot of us. I may be the one talking to you tonight and telling you my story, but there are thousands. The night of the wake was horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. My sister worked for me that night so I could go.
What? Tell me about it.
Robert and I went. One of the guys from the CYO started a caravan on the other side of Williamsbridge Road and came down Mace Avenue, picking us up along the way. And he went past Bronxwood Avenue, which is where Faranga's was, to make sure, picked up 2 people on the corner of Barnes and Mace, and then came down the block to get me and Robert. We went down to the end of the block and crossed. We didn't have to cross. Well, made the right to go back towards where Boston Road and Allerton Avenue meet, and that's where Faranga's is. And when we got there, there were thousands of people. At least that's what it looked like. And newspapers, newspaper media vans,
Right.
reporters all over the place. The guys in our group, because we were a pretty big group, formed a barricade around us girls with their backs to all the press. Because for us, the rule was Val's parents hadn't talked to anybody. So it was not our place to talk to anybody. So we weren't going to talk to anybody. They weren't talking to the press, so we weren't talking to the press.
Were these spoken rules or were these unspoken that you were talking? Like,
I think they were spoken and unspoken, because I remember my parents telling us, especially because we were heading off to the wake that night. Don't be talking to the press.
Right.
Val's parents haven't said anything to the press. So I think almost everybody knew. 2 people broke ranks that night. One girl and one guy, and we were like, "Who the heck are they to talk?"
Right.
They don't represent the family. Let the family. If the family doesn't want to talk, we're not going to talk. So the guys knew this. They all formed this barricade around us girls and herded us safely into the wake. Val's father was catatonic. I mean, he was there and not there. I don't even think he looked at me when I hugged him.
Wow.
And Val's sister was frenzied. Mom was doing her best to be the rock for the family at that point, but you could tell she just lost her baby.
Yeah.
And it was a closed casket.
I would imagine it would have to be.
Everybody else feels about it, but I find that you don't really get much closure with a closed casket. You don't really get to say goodbye.
Right.
So I remember hugging her family, and then Robert and I made our way over to the casket to say a prayer. And just the atmosphere there was horrible. Horrible.
Right. This mixture of course, tragedy, sadness, but then this media frenzy and that whole thing that was going on with the newspapers wanting to sell every, papers and get the most salacious stories they could. So yeah, an interesting mix there.
And you have to realize back then there were no such things as grief counselors.
Right.
We had each other. That's
right.
We had each other. We had the priests. We had the parents. We had our community.
And so you all end up at what is it, St. Raymond Cemetery down there?
I did not get to go. The funeral was the next day, and we had finals. We had finals. It was, the end of school. I didn't even get to go to the church. So it was real important that I got to the wake.
Right. Wow.
I mean, and I just came back, and I had to work Friday night for my sister. She had worked for me the night before.
She had worked for you. So then what is the aftermath in the neighborhood? Like, what kind of stain does this leave and residue is this leaving in the neighborhood? And
well, we wouldn't go anywhere alone. We did things in big groups. And at that point, all the guys who worked at the supermarket with us would walk the girls home afterwards.
Okay.
On a Thursday or Friday night when we worked till 9 o'clock.
And so then Judy Placido gets shot, and that must, as you said, that sends the neighborhood into absolute overdrive. And then August 10th comes by, and then all of a sudden they arrest this schlub up in Yonkers named David Berkowitz. So what, do you have any remembrances of that and anything that you could tell us about?
I can't speak for anybody else. I was not relieved until I was sure that was the person, that they got the person, that this wasn't just some big newspaper thing to try to put everybody's mind at ease.
Ah, interesting. So you didn't believe it was him.
I have my skeptical side
Right.
until it's
Now,
clear to me that this is the guy that did it, because this is the guy, I'd like to kill.
right, of course. Now, did you come to that conclusion? How long did it take for you to come to that conclusion that he was the guilty party?
I don't know. I would say a couple of weeks.
Uh-huh. Now, this is a question that I was going to ask, but of course, Hannah just asked it in the chat. And I asked this on about with everyone, and I personally don't believe Berkowitz had help, but were there any rumors of Berkowitz having accomplices? Did you guys believe that? Did you guys have any opinions of that?
It was believed because there were so many different police sketches of what he looked like. And I think David Berkowitz, in one of his interviews, was naming who killed or who shot, who performed whatever they did that night. But when it did come to Val and Alex, he said it was him.
Right. He admitted to the Bronx shootings. He since has admitted to it all, and he's just come out in a recent book that say that he did it all by himself.
I know, I heard that. But
yeah, that he lied.
Then we didn't know, and so
right.
The idea that it was a cult or a gang, especially when we saw the pictures of his apartment, was not so far-fetched.
So you guys in the neighborhood actually thought it might be a gang of people?
Well, it was presumed that he was part of some sort of a cult.
Mm-hmm. Did you get that from just those newspaper articles going around, or was this something that was independently coming up in your neighborhood as a topic?
I hadn't heard anything in the neighborhood. Other people might have, but I didn't hear anything in the neighborhood, so only what I read in the papers.
So it was coming from the newspapers that you guys were okay, because a series of articles did come out in about 1979 talking about Berkowitz having accomplices and all that kind of stuff, and I mean, we all believed it. I mean, I know
it was very probable.
And so, did you continue with those thoughts? Like, do you have any opinions of it today, or do you think it's Berkowitz alone today? And
well, like I say, for me, he killed Val and Alex.
He killed Val,
and that's all. That's all I need to know.
Right. Exactly. So I'm just trying to think of any other questions, because this was quite a powerful story.
I actually would like to tell you the story of how I re-met her sister.
Please.
All those years later, because it was because of Val. Like I said to you, I believe in fate. I believe in all those kinds of things. And my husband owns a restaurant in Valhalla, New York.
Mm-hmm.
This was probably about a little more than a dozen years ago. And this particular night, I was sitting at the bar with two sets of couple friends who were waiting for a third couple to arrive before having dinner. And they were having drinks, and the five of us were chatting. And my husband comes running over to me and he goes, "Gloria, could you just come with me?" And I was the one talking, so he just interrupted me.
Somehow I have a feeling that that's a mistake.
I said, "I'm in the middle of a conversation here." He said, "I know, but could you just come?" I said, "Well, is it important?" He said, "No, but just come quick, come quick." And I was about to say, "Let me finish what I'm saying, I'll be right there," because he just said it wasn't important. And I felt this, it's a very hard thing to describe. I'll call it a whoosh, but it's not really like that. And I've felt things like that before. So, sometimes you'll hear a medium say to somebody they're reading, "Did you feel that?"
Mm-hmm.
And I always assume whenever I get that kind of a feeling, it's one of my dead relatives, whoever it is, they want me to do something. So let me just go with it. So whoever it was wanted me off the chair and wanted me to go with him. So I politely excused myself, and I caught up with him in the dining room and said, "What's going on?" He said, "There's a woman at the front door talking about maybe having her daughter's bridal shower here, and she's from the old neighborhood." This becomes a roll my eyes moment. All right, you don't remember her. You don't recognize her or her name, and you're wondering if I do. Got it. So when you go through the dining room, there's a door this way and stairs this way going up to the party room. You go through the door, and that's the entryway into the restaurant. And I'm on a landing. The hostess podium is right next to me, and the hostess is standing there. There's a step down, a shorter landing, 2 steps down, and another shorter landing to the front door. And she's literally straddling the door, waiting for her husband to bring the car around. And she's got her back to me. My husband goes down the stairs, taps her on the shoulder, and the minute she turned around, I recognized her immediately. And my husband says to me, do you remember the Suriani family from the Bronx? And I wanted to smack him at that point in time, because it's not like I didn't talk about Val. It's not like my kids didn't know about Val. But in retrospect, I probably didn't mention her last name a lot.
Right. But he
And
didn't remember?
the last name, no, he's younger than, he's Robert's. He's my brother Robert's age.
Okay.
My brother Robert's class. He was a year behind me. So he was not really friends with them.
Right.
He was not CYO or any of those involving things. So I'm looking at her and I'm like, do I just say yes, or do I say what I think she wants to hear? And I say, yes, I knew Val, and she got all engaged. And she said, did you know her from St. Catherine's? I'm thinking to myself, how does she not recognize me? I look exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I know her from St. Lucy's. She was the first friend I ever made in school. Being a twin, that was such a big deal. Coming home and mom asks how my day was. And I said, Mommy, I made a friend today and her name is Valentina. And she gave me her phone number. And mom says, great, let's go put it in the phone book. What's her last name? And I said, I don't know, but Valentina, isn't that a pretty name? And mom put it under V for Valentina. And in parentheses, she wrote Gloria's friend, which was it was not Teresa's friend, it was Gloria's friend. And I'm telling her this story. And like I said, there weren't a lot of twins in school. We had 2 sets of identicals in our class, and none of this is registering with her. So I'm thinking maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is a cousin or something. I mean, it's been 30 years,
right.
you know?
Right.
And I said, so how do you know the family? And she says, well, Val is my sister. And I said, see, Nancy, I knew it was you, but you didn't recognize me. And she got all flustered. She said, wait, you know me? I said, of course I know you. And I'm about to say, I've been in your apartment many times, but this crazy image popped into my head. And I knew that this is what I was supposed to say. And I have to say, like, Val must have been like using me to talk to her sister at that point in time.
Right.
And I looked at her and I said, of course I know you. You know, your crazy sister tried to teach me how to ride a unicycle. Now, Val taught herself how to ride this unicycle and then shoved it into a closet. So not many people would have even known that she knew how to ride a unicycle. But she spent that afternoon with me, and I almost broke my neck. And we started reminiscing, crying, chatting, hugging. And she said to me, I often wonder if people forgot my sister. And I looked at her and I said, I have lit a candle for your sister every April 17th since 1978. There are a lot of us. Believe me when I tell you, there are a lot of us. Your sister's never been forgotten. And, you know, we hugged, we chit-chatted, and she said, you know, this is my sister talking to me through you right now. And I said, yeah, yeah, she's just letting you know she's going to be around for her niece's wedding. She wouldn't miss it. She hasn't missed anything. And we hugged and exchanged phone numbers, and we became friends that night.
Wow. What, you know, Gloria, I said that you were going to be amazing, and you definitely are.
And I think the friendship too has become very cathartic for both of us. For both of us. And I got to meet her daughters, and they got to meet their Aunt Val through somebody who wasn't a relative.
Right, exactly. Someone to connect back to the old days, which is why I think that this is oral history. This is important stuff that we're putting on the record here.
It is, because the victims get lost in all the sensationalism of the crime and the perpetrator of the crime. And they were real people with families and friends and a neighborhood that loved and cared about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really touched that I met you guys, because out of all of the victims and survivors and relatives, it's really the circle of around Valentina Suriani that has been the most active and the most carrying the flame the most. Really, I haven't seen it with any other victim. It seems it's almost as if they ceased to exist that day, and that was it. No one ever remembered them again. But with Valentina, it was completely different. Unbelievable. So, Gloria, I want to say thank you so much. Is there anything that I might have missed that you want to that you feel it's important to let the audience know?
Well, we were talking about the feeling in the neighborhood, and we did have an incident happen at my house a little more than a year after Val's murder that stuck with me forever and ever and ever. And I'm sure my brother and sister remember that night too. Teresa, my sister, had recently been engaged the end of that April. So this had to be May. after Mother's Day, but before Memorial Day. And it was just a typical Saturday night. And I got home first. We had a curfew. I got home probably a little after midnight that night. And when I walked in the door, I saw the light go on upstairs, and my father leaned over the railing and, he could see me. And he said, "Gloria, that's you?" And I said, yeah, Dad. He goes, "Well, Stephen's already in bed. Let the dogs out. Robert and Teresa aren't home yet." I said, "All right, go to bed, go to bed." About 15 minutes later, Robert got home. I was watching Saturday Night Live in the living room. And the light went on again upstairs. My father leaned over the railing and did the shout whisper, "Rob, that's you? All right, Teresa's not home yet." Robert, of course, "Go to bed, go to bed." And he and I are in the living room and we're watching Saturday Night Live. It had just ended. The midnight special was going on. And Teresa came home. And Dad, light went on again. Dad leaned over. "Teresa, that's you? Okay. All troops present and accounted for. Secure the premises." I told you my father was military. And Teresa, of course, said, "Go to bed, go to bed." She came in the living room and the three of us are watching the midnight special and chatting about our nights. And we hear voices. And every time Dad opened the light, did the shout whisper, he woke up Mom. She was not a happy camper. And the disagreement escalated, and Mom came down the stairs. Dad was chasing after her, and she's explaining to him that he's waking her up, and he's explaining to her that I can't sleep until I know they're all home safe. And they're going through the living room, into the dining room, around the kitchen, back up the hallway. Mom starts to climb the stairs, and Daddy grabs her hand and he says, "I just want you to understand, I can't go to sleep until I know they're all home safe." And my mother looked at him. I'll never forget this. I'm gonna quote this exact verbatim. She looked at him and she said, "Yeah, well, Frank was waiting up for Val that night. Was it better that he was awake when the cops came to the door to tell him his daughter was dead? His waiting up didn't save her. She didn't come home safe that night because he waited up for her." I think even the television went quiet at that moment, because then it hits you that it hasn't left them either. It hasn't left the parents either. And I will tell you, I never waited up for my kids.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Hold on one second. I'm just dealing with some dog issues in the back. I'm very sorry about this.
Okay. I mean, you just, in that moment, you feel that, as much as you're hurting as a friend, the parents are still reeling from it too. It's a year later and they're still reeling from it. I don't think.
Yeah, it sounded just from that story like all of this emotions just kind of pardon the use of this term, but just sort of like vomited out in one.
I mean, we don't even know if he was waiting up. I don't even know if what she said was true, but that's what was in her head at that moment. And like I said, I think even the television went quiet at that moment. The three of us were just in the living room, almost playing statue at that point.
Right.
And that hit. It's a night I'll never forget.
So, yeah, it sounds like this just left a massive stain, and
And I can't be the only one.
No, absolutely not.
I'm the one talking to you tonight, but there are a lot of us.
And this is important for people to see, the fact that just this one action by this one guy randomly on this one night reverberates to this very day. And so, it never ends really for the friends and families of the victims. And I think that's important to put out there. So, Gloria, I want to say thank you so much. This was unbelievably great. I'm so thankful, and I'm sure that the audience is very thankful for you and your story. It was highly powerful stuff. And I just want to give you the last word here before we see the show out.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Manny, because I think it is important to keep the victims alive. They're like I say, there are a lot of us were affected, devastated, and forever scarred by that summer.
Right.
And we always will be.
Well, I'm glad that in this small little way we were able to, provide the forum for you and for Gary and, for anybody who wants to come forward to tell their stories and to hopefully get a little closure and catharsis out of this, because it always feels good to get these things out and talk about these things rather than keep them inside. So I want to say thank you so much, Gloria. I'm going to see the audience on out. I'm going to take you backstage, but if you wouldn't mind, please just wait for me to say goodbye, and then I'll see you off the air so we could say goodbye off the air. Okay?
My pleasure.
Thank you. I'll just
Thanks for having
You're very welcome. I'll just be back in a minute to you. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thanks. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Sorry about Maxie in that last minute. He brought in a chew toy. It was like at the worst possible moment. He could have done that. I feel horrible that happened. My sincere apologies to the audience for that. But unfortunately, that couldn't be helped. He is who he is. But anyway, I'm glad that you all were able to tune in and hear this very powerful oral testimony and history from Gloria Calilli-Zonghetti, great childhood friend of Valentina Suriani. All right, guys. So I think that's basically it. That's going to take us on out for today's show. Huge thank you to Gloria. Huge thank you to Gary McNerney for hooking me up with Gloria. And hopefully we'll see all of you guys again soon on the next show. Until then, thank you very much.